I'm still processing what happened 3 weeks ago and honestly don't know where to go from here. My son Christian was born on September 2nd after a complicated delivery that kept us in the hospital for 4 days. June, my wife of 3 years, seemed exhausted but happy when we finally got moved to the recovery room. Let me back up and give you the full picture. I'm 28, work as a project manager for a construction company, and make decent money. June and I met in college and got married when we were both 25. For the first 2 years, everything seemed solid. We bought our house together, talked about starting a family, had what I thought was a normal marriage. The thing is, I've been suspicious for months. June started working late constantly around January, always with her friend Everly, who works in the same accounting firm. She'd come home with stories about client deadlines and weekend projects that never seemed to end. Her phone went from being casually left around to being glued to her hand with the screen always face down. When I'd ask about her day, she'd get defensive about why I was questioning her. The changes were subtle at first. She started dressing differently for work, buying new clothes, and spending more time getting ready in the mornings. She'd shower immediately when she got home, which she'd never done before. Our conversations became surface level, like we were roommates instead of married partners. When I'd try to plan date nights or weekend activities, she always had something else she needed to do. The breaking point came in March when I found a receipt for a weekend hotel stay in her jacket pocket. When I asked about it, she claimed it was for a work conference she'd forgotten to mention. The dates didn't match any business calendar I could find online for her company. I started paying attention to details after that. So there I was on September 4th, holding my newborn son while June slept, when Everly showed up for what she called a quick visit. They thought I was dozing in the chair by the window. June woke up, and they started talking in what they probably thought were quiet voices. I had my phone in my pocket already recording because I'd been documenting her weird behavior for weeks. Call it paranoia or intuition. But something told me to hit record when Everly walked in. What I heard changed everything. June told Everly that this pathetic loser actually thinks having a baby will save our dead marriage. She said she's been sleeping with my brother Neil for months and just needs me to pay the medical bills first before she makes her move. The baby's delivery complications meant we were looking at around $40,000 in medical expenses, even with insurance. Everly laughed and said I should bleed him dry and take everything because I'm too stupid to see it coming. June agreed and said she'd already moved half our savings to a private account she opened. Once the medical bills clear, she plans to take Christian and file for the house and the divorce. They actually high-fived over making me pay child support too. I kept recording for another 20 minutes while they planned out timeline details. June wanted to wait until after the holidays so she could have one more Christmas with my family's money, as she put it. Neil apparently has been pushing her to leave sooner, but she convinced him that getting the medical bills paid first was smarter. The worst part was hearing her describe Christian as her insurance policy. She said even if I suspected something, I'd never leave while she was pregnant, and now with the baby, I'd be even more trapped into paying for everything. I sat there holding my son, listening to his mother plan my financial destruction with surgical precision. When Everly left an hour later, June pretended to sleep. I pretended I'd been asleep the whole time. We spent 2 more days in that hospital room acting like everything was normal, while I figured out my next moves. The recording is crystal clear. You can hear both their voices distinctly discussing timeline, amounts, and specific plans. I've made multiple backup copies and stored them in different locations. I haven't confronted June yet because I wanted to secure our finances first. I managed to move our remaining joint savings to an account she doesn't have access to, claiming I was setting up Christian's college fund when she asked. I also pulled our credit reports and found she'd applied for 2 new credit cards using our joint income information without telling me. My brother Neil has been calling me every few days since the birth, asking how June and the baby are doing. His concern feels different now, knowing what I know. He's been married to Shirley for 5 years and they have 2 kids together. I haven't said anything to him yet either. What makes this situation even more complicated is the family dynamics. Neil and I have always been close, or so I thought. He's 2 years older and has always been the successful one. He's a regional sales manager and makes more money than me. Our parents always held him up as the example I should follow. He was my best man at my wedding, and I was his. Our families spent holidays together. Our kids were going to grow up as cousins. Shirley and I get along well too, which makes this even more twisted. She's been texting me pictures of baby clothes and asking if June needs help with anything. She has no idea her husband has been sleeping with my wife and planning to destroy my life. Their kids are 7 and 5, and they absolutely adore June. She babysits them sometimes when Shirley and Neil want date nights. The medical bills started arriving this week. June keeps asking when I'm going to call the insurance company about setting up a payment plan. She's being extra sweet and attentive, talking about our future and how grateful she is that I'm handling all the financial stress so she can focus on recovery. The irony is that she's actually right about me being trapped by Christian. Not in the way she thinks, but I would do anything to protect my son. Every time I look at him, I wonder if he's actually mine. The timing works out, but now I have doubts about everything. I haven't brought up a paternity test yet because I'm not sure I want to know the answer while dealing with everything else. I've been going through our financial records more carefully since I got that recording. The private account she mentioned isn't the only thing she's hidden. I found evidence of cash withdrawals that don't match any expenses I know about. Small amounts, 50 or 100 here and there, but they add up. She's been skimming from our joint account for months. There are also charges on our credit card for restaurants and stores during times when she claimed to be working late. The restaurant charges are always for two people, and they're at places across town from her office. When I asked about one of them specifically, she said it was a client dinner that Everly helped with. But Everly wasn't on the company credit card records I found. The more I dig, the more I realize this has been going on longer than just a few months. She's been methodical about it, careful not to take too much at once or make changes too obvious. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, I might never have pieced it together. The medical bills started arriving this week. June keeps asking when I'm going to call the insurance company about setting up a payment plan. She's being extra sweet and attentive, talking about our future and how grateful she is that I'm handling all the financial stress so she can focus on recovery. I know I need to confront this situation, but I'm not sure about the timing or approach. Part of me wants to see how far she'll actually take this plan. Another part of me wants to protect my son from whatever explosive confrontation is coming. The family attorney I consulted specializes in divorce cases involving deception. She reviewed the recording and confirmed it would be admissible in custody proceedings. She also said June's financial deception could work strongly in my favor, especially since she documented her intent to defraud me. The attorney suggested I continue gathering evidence for now and avoid confronting June until I have a complete picture of the financial damage. I've started documenting everything methodically: bank statements, credit card records, receipts, text messages, even a timeline of her behavior changes. The attorney said detailed records would be crucial for both custody and asset division. I never thought I'd be building a case against my own wife, but I keep thinking about Christian and whether there's any way to resolve this without destroying his chance at having both parents in his life. Even knowing what June has done, part of me wonders if there's a path forward that doesn't involve a bitter custody battle. Then I remember her calling me pathetic and planning to bleed me dry, and I realize she made this choice for both of us. The hardest part is pretending everything is normal. When she asks about my day or talks about our plans for Christian's future, I have to respond like I don't know she's planning to take him away from me. When she kisses me goodbye in the morning or thanks me for handling the insurance paperwork, I have to act like I trust her completely. Neil stopped by yesterday to see the baby. He held Christian and made jokes about becoming the favorite uncle. He asked if June was recovering well and whether we needed help with anything around the house. The whole time I kept thinking about him sleeping with my wife while I was at work, planning to destroy my marriage while playing the concerned brother. What really gets to me is how confident they both seem in their plan. June acts like she's already won, like I'm so predictable and naive that she can manipulate me indefinitely. Everly obviously thinks I'm a complete fool who will never figure it out. Even Neil seems to believe he can keep playing the loving brother while sleeping with my wife. Everyone keeps telling me how lucky I am to have such a devoted wife and how beautiful our little family looks. If they only knew what I know. My mom called yesterday to check on us and spent 20 minutes gushing about what a wonderful mother June will be and how happy she is that we're finally building the family we always wanted. My parents love June almost more than they love me. She charmed them from the moment I brought her home in college. They're going to be devastated when this comes out, and they'll probably blame me somehow for not being a good enough husband to keep her happy. That's another thing that bothers me about this whole situation. June didn't just betray me. She betrayed my entire family. My parents, my sister Sky, who considers June her closest friend, everyone who welcomed her into our family and trusted her. She's going to destroy all of those relationships too, and for what? Money and whatever she thinks she has with Neil? I'm not looking for advice on whether to forgive her or work things out. That ship sailed when I heard her call me pathetic and plan to bleed me dry. I'm just trying to figure out the best way forward that protects my son and doesn't leave me financially destroyed. Part of me is curious to see if she'll actually go through with it, or if she'll lose her nerve when the moment comes. The other part of me wants to end this charade before it goes any further. What would you do? Update 1. I posted 2 weeks ago about recording my wife June and her friend Everly planning to destroy me financially after our son Christian was born. Well, things have escalated way beyond what I expected, and I need to get this all out. First, thanks to everyone who told me to secure everything financially before confronting anyone. You were absolutely right. I spent those 2 weeks quietly moving money, copying documents, and building my case. What I found was worse than I initially thought. The financial investigation revealed that June had been planning this for almost a year. She opened that private account back in December, not recently like I thought. She's been moving small amounts consistently, never enough to trigger alerts, but it adds up to nearly $15,000. She also applied for credit cards using inflated income figures and has been making cash advances to fund whatever she and Neil have been doing. But here's where it gets interesting. I wasn't planning to confront her yet, but she forced my hand. Last Wednesday, June asked me to handle the insurance paperwork for Christian's medical bills. She wanted me to set up the payment plan and put everything in my name only. She kept pushing about getting it done immediately, saying she was worried about our credit if we delayed. The urgency felt wrong, especially knowing what I knew. When I told her I wanted to wait until we had a better handle on our overall finances first, she completely lost it. She started crying and saying I was being irresponsible with our son's medical needs. She accused me of not caring about Christian's future and being selfish about money when we should be focused on our family. That performance was so over the top that I decided to test something. I told her I'd been thinking about our financial situation and wanted to understand where we stood with our savings. I asked her to go through our accounts together so we could make a proper budget. The panic on her face was immediate. She started stumbling over explanations about automatic transfers and security deposits, and a dozen other excuses for why our savings was lower than expected. She kept saying she'd handle the account review later, that she was too tired to deal with numbers right now. So I pushed further. I told her I'd already looked at the accounts and noticed some discrepancies. I wanted to understand the transfers to an account I didn't recognize. June went completely pale and then immediately went on the attack. She accused me of not trusting her, of treating her like a child, of being controlling about money. She said I was making her feel like a prisoner in her own home, and that she shouldn't have to justify every financial decision to me. The fight lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of her trying to flip this situation so that I was the problem. She brought up every argument we'd ever had, every time I'd questioned any of her decisions, every moment of friction in our marriage. According to her, this was all evidence of my controlling nature and lack of trust. But here's what really got to me. She never once actually explained the money. For 3 hours, she deflected, attacked, and played victim, but she never said where that $15,000 went. She never explained the private account or the credit cards or any of it. When I finally asked her directly about the private account, she admitted she opened it but claimed it was for surprise Christmas gifts and a vacation she wanted to plan for us. She said she was trying to save money for our family's future without me worrying about the expenses. I asked her why she needed $15,000 for Christmas gifts. She said it wasn't just gifts. It was for Christian's future, for emergencies, for things she wanted to handle without bothering me while I was dealing with work stress. None of it made sense, and she knew I wasn't buying it. That's when she played the nuclear card. She started crying and said she couldn't believe I would interrogate her like this while she was still recovering from childbirth. She said I was being cruel and heartless and that she felt like I didn't even want to be married to her anymore. She asked me if I wanted a divorce. Just like that, she put it on the table and made it sound like my idea. I looked at her and said if she wanted to leave, she was free to go, but Christian stays with me. She could visit any time she wanted, but I wouldn't be supporting her financially while she lived somewhere else. The mask completely slipped. She screamed at me that I couldn't keep her son away from her, that no court would give custody to a father over a mother, and that I was delusional if I thought I had any power in this situation. She said I was just like my father, controlling and manipulative, and that she'd been stupid to think I was different. She said Neil had warned her that our family had issues with treating women like property, but she'd defended me until now. Wait, what? Neil had been discussing our marriage with her? Neil had been giving her advice about my family? When I asked her what she meant about Neil warning her, she realized she'd said too much. She backtracked and said it was just general observations about family dynamics, nothing specific. But I pressed her on it. When had Neil been discussing our marriage? Why was my brother analyzing my relationship with my wife? What exactly had he said about me and our family? She wouldn't answer directly, but what came out was that Neil had been her shoulder to cry on about our marriage problems. He'd been listening to her complaints about me and validating her feelings that I was difficult to live with. According to June, Neil understood her in ways I never could. He appreciated her intelligence and independence, while I just wanted to control her. He supported her dreams and ambitions while I held her back. Every word made it clearer how long this had been going on. This wasn't just a physical affair. Neil had been systematically turning my wife against me by positioning himself as the understanding alternative to her terrible husband. I asked her how long she'd been running to Neil with complaints about our marriage. She said it wasn't like that, they were just friends, and I was being paranoid and jealous. So I asked her if she wanted to call Neil and discuss this together. All three of us could sit down and talk through these marriage problems that Neil apparently understood so well. She panicked and said that would be inappropriate, that Neil was married and wouldn't want to get involved in our personal issues. She said I was being manipulative by trying to drag other people into our problems. The irony was incredible. She'd been discussing our marriage with Neil for months, but asking him to participate in resolving the issues was somehow inappropriate. I told her I thought it would be very appropriate to include Neil in this conversation, since he apparently had such strong opinions about our relationship and had been advising her about her marriage to his brother. That's when she broke down completely. She started sobbing and saying she couldn't handle this stress while trying to take care of a newborn. She said I was being cruel and that she needed space to think. She packed a bag and said she was going to stay with Everly for a few days until I calmed down and we could have a rational conversation about our problems. I told her that was fine, but Christian was staying with me. She could pump milk and bring it by, but the baby wasn't leaving the house. She tried to argue, but I reminded her that she was the one who said she needed space to think. Space meant space from all of it, not just from me. She left that night and I haven't seen her since. But the fallout has been intense. Neil called me the next morning asking what happened. He said June had called Everly crying and that Everly had called Shirley worried about our marriage. He wanted to know if there was anything he could do to help. I told Neil I'd love to get his advice about marriage problems, since apparently he'd been giving June guidance about ours for months. The silence on the phone was everything I needed to hear. When he finally responded, he said June was just upset and had exaggerated whatever she told me. He said she'd maybe mentioned some normal marriage stuff to him in passing, but it wasn't like he was counseling her or anything. I asked him when these passing conversations had happened and where. He said he couldn't remember specific instances, just that June occasionally seemed stressed when she was around for family stuff. Family stuff, not work stuff or random encounters. Family gatherings where she'd been confiding in my brother about problems in my marriage. The conversation lasted an hour. Neil kept insisting that he'd never encouraged June to be unhappy with me, that he'd actually told her that marriage takes work and she needed to communicate better with me. But when I asked him why he hadn't mentioned to me that my wife was apparently so unhappy, he said he didn't want to interfere in our relationship. He said it wasn't his place to get involved between husband and wife, except he had gotten involved. He'd been listening to her complaints and offering advice. He'd been validating her feelings and apparently making observations about our family dynamics. He just hadn't involved himself in any way that might actually help our marriage. I haven't confronted him about the affair yet. I'm still not sure about the timing on that, but June has been calling me every day trying to convince me to let her bring Christian to Everly's place for visits. Each conversation reveals more of her actual plan. She keeps talking about how much easier it would be if Christian could stay overnight with her sometimes. She mentions how expensive it is for me to handle all the childcare alone and suggests splitting time with the baby would be better for everyone. She's still trying to execute her original plan, just from a different angle. The medical bills are still coming in, and she calls about those too. She wants to know when I'm setting up the payment plan and keeps emphasizing that time is important for our credit rating. I finally told her I'd handle the medical bills when she explains where our missing money went. Until then, everything financial is on hold. She hung up on me. My parents don't know what's really happening yet. They know June is staying with a friend temporarily and that we're having some marital difficulties, but they're pushing for us to work things out for Christian's sake. My mom keeps calling to check on me and offering to help with the baby. She asks about June every time and makes comments about how hard adjustment can be after having a baby. She has no idea that her other son has been working to destroy my marriage for months. This is nowhere near over, but at least now I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Part of me wants to see how far June will take this before she realizes her plan isn't working. The other part of me wants to end this nightmare before it gets worse. Either way, I'm done pretending I don't know what's happening. Update 2. You guys, I can't believe what happened this weekend. The situation with June and Neil has completely blown up, and now both our families are involved. I'm writing this at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep after the most intense family confrontation of my life. Quick recap. I caught my wife June and brother Neil planning to financially destroy me while I was holding our newborn son Christian. June moved out to stay with her friend Everly, and I've been taking care of Christian alone while building my legal case. So last Sunday was supposed to be our monthly family dinner at my parents' house. These dinners have been a tradition for years. My parents, me and June, Neil and Shirley with their kids. Everyone brings something and we spend the afternoon together. June had been texting me all week asking if I was bringing Christian to family dinner. She said it wasn't fair to keep him away from his grandparents and that our personal problems shouldn't affect the whole family. She kept emphasizing how much my parents missed seeing their grandson and how disappointed they'd be if we didn't show up. I told her she was welcome to go to family dinner, but Christian and I wouldn't be there if she was planning to attend. She could choose. Either she could go and visit with everyone, or I could bring Christian to see my parents, but we weren't doing this as a happy family while she was actively trying to destroy our marriage. She chose to go, so I stayed home with Christian, figuring I'd visit my parents later in the week when June wasn't around. But around 4 p.m., my mom called, asking where we were and sounding confused about why June was there without us. My mom said June had told everyone I was being stubborn about some money disagreement and refusing to bring Christian to family dinner out of spite. According to June, I was going through a difficult time adjusting to fatherhood and taking it out on her by withholding access to the baby. My mom was calling to ask what was really going on and whether I needed help dealing with whatever stress I was under. The concern in her voice made me realize June was successfully painting me as the unstable one who was keeping Christian away from family for petty reasons. That's when I decided I needed to go over there and set the record straight. I packed up Christian and drove to my parents' house. When I walked in, the atmosphere was tense. June was sitting next to my mom on the couch, looking like she'd been crying. Neil was in the kitchen with my dad, and Shirley was helping clean up from dinner. My mom immediately came over to take Christian and started asking if I was okay. She said June had explained that I'd been acting strange since the birth, and she was worried about postpartum stress affecting fathers too. I looked around the room and realized everyone was treating me like I was the problem. June had gotten there first with her version of events, and now I was the difficult husband who was having trouble adjusting to parenthood. So I said I wanted to clear up some confusion about our situation. I said June and I were having serious marital problems, but it wasn't about money disagreements or adjustment stress. June immediately jumped in saying we shouldn't discuss our personal problems in front of the whole family. She said this wasn't the time or place for relationship drama, and we should handle our issues privately. My dad agreed and said family dinner wasn't the place for marital counseling. He suggested June and I work things out at home and not involve everyone else in our problems. But I said I thought it was important for everyone to understand what was really happening, since June had already given them her version of events. I said our marriage problems weren't about typical adjustment issues or money disagreements. That's when Neil spoke up from the kitchen asking what I meant by that. He said June had mentioned I was stressed about finances and having trouble with the new responsibilities of fatherhood. I looked at Neil and said I was actually handling fatherhood just fine. What I was having trouble with was my wife planning to divorce me and take everything we owned while I paid the medical bills from Christian's birth. The room went completely silent. My mom asked what I was talking about. June started crying and saying I was having some kind of breakdown and making up stories about her. So I said I wasn't making up anything. I had evidence of June planning to leave me as soon as I handled the medical expenses. And I had evidence of financial deception going back months. June stood up and said I was being cruel and manipulative, trying to turn my family against her when she'd done nothing wrong. She said I was having paranoid thoughts and refusing to communicate normally about our problems. My mom looked confused and asked what evidence I was talking about. She said this didn't sound like June at all, and maybe there was some misunderstanding. That's when I decided to end this charade once and for all. I told everyone I had recorded June discussing her plans in detail, and I had financial records showing money being moved without my knowledge. I said June had been planning this divorce for months and timing it specifically to maximize the financial damage to me. June completely lost it. She started screaming that I had no right to record private conversations and that I was violating her privacy. She said I was being abusive and controlling, and that recording her was proof of how unstable I'd become. Neil came out of the kitchen and asked what conversations I was talking about. He said if June had been upset about our marriage, maybe she'd just been venting to friends and I was misinterpreting normal relationship complaints. I looked right at Neil and said June hadn't been venting to friends. She'd been venting to him for months. And he'd been encouraging her to see me as controlling and manipulative instead of encouraging her to work on our marriage. The color drained from Neil's face. Shirley asked what I meant about Neil being involved in our marriage problems. She said Neil had never mentioned June having issues with me, so I explained that Neil had been June's confidant about our relationship problems. He'd been listening to her complaints about me and validating her feelings instead of suggesting marriage counseling or communication. He'd been positioning himself as the understanding alternative to her difficult husband. June tried to interrupt, saying that wasn't true, that Neil was just being a supportive family member when she was going through a hard time. But I kept going. I said Neil's support had been very comprehensive, so comprehensive that he'd apparently developed strong feelings about our relationship and had been advising June about how to handle her marriage to his brother. Neil started saying I was twisting innocent conversations and making them sound like something they weren't. He said if June had talked to him about relationship stress, he'd only listened as a concerned family member. That's when I asked Neil if he thought sleeping with his brother's wife fell under the category of concerned family member support. The explosion that followed was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Shirley screamed. My mother gasped and started crying. My father stood up and demanded to know what I was accusing my brother of. June ran to the bathroom sobbing. Neil started shouting that I was having some kind of mental breakdown and making up insane accusations. But Shirley wasn't letting it go. She was staring at Neil, demanding to know what I was talking about. She asked him directly if he'd been sleeping with June. Neil kept saying I was delusional and stressed and making up stories. He said he'd never touched June inappropriately and that I was having paranoid delusions about innocent family interactions. My dad was trying to calm everyone down, saying we all needed to take a step back and handle this rationally. He said accusations like this could destroy the family, and I needed to be very careful about what I was claiming. But Shirley wasn't backing down. She asked Neil to look her in the eye and swear on their children that he'd never had an affair with June. The pause before Neil answered told everyone everything they needed to know. He said, of course, he'd never had an affair, but the way he said it made it clear he was lying. Shirley started crying and asking how long it had been going on. June came out of the bathroom and tried to leave, but my mom blocked the door asking what was happening. June said I was destroying everyone's lives with paranoid accusations and she couldn't be around my toxic behavior anymore. I told my mom I had proof. I said I had recording of June admitting the affair and planning the divorce timeline to maximize financial damage to me. I said I had financial records showing deception going back months. My mom asked to hear the recording. June panicked and said I had no right to share private conversations and that playing recordings would be a violation of everyone's privacy. She said anything I'd recorded without permission would be meaningless anyway. But my father said if I had evidence of what I was claiming, maybe we all needed to hear it. He said accusations this serious needed to be substantiated or retracted. So I played them the relevant parts of the hospital recording. The reactions were immediate and devastating. My mom started crying harder. Shirley ran out of the house. My dad sat down heavily and put his head in his hands. Neil tried to claim the recording was taken out of context or edited somehow. He said people say things when they're angry that they don't mean, and stressed conversations after childbirth weren't representative of anyone's real intentions. But June's voice on that recording was clear and calculating. There was no anger or stress, just cold planning and mockery of my stupidity. My mom asked June if what she heard was true. She asked if June had really been planning to divorce me and take Christian away after I paid the medical bills. June said the situation was more complicated than it sounded and that I'd been emotionally distant and controlling throughout her pregnancy. She said she'd been scared and had talked to Neil about feeling trapped in an unhappy marriage. She said Neil had been supportive and understanding during a difficult time and that their relationship had developed naturally from friendship to something deeper. She said they'd never intended to hurt anyone, but they'd fallen in love and couldn't help their feelings. My father asked Neil if he had anything to say. Neil said he was sorry for any pain he'd caused, but that he and June had a genuine connection that went beyond physical attraction. He said they'd tried to resist their feelings, but ultimately couldn't deny what they had together. He said June deserved to be with someone who appreciated her and made her happy, and that he could provide the emotional support that I'd failed to give her. The conversation that followed lasted until almost midnight. Neil and June tried to frame their affair as a love story that developed naturally from friendship. They claimed they'd been trying to find a way to handle the situation without hurting anyone. My parents were devastated. My mom kept asking how this could happen in our family and how they could betray not just me, but Shirley and their children. Shirley came back an hour later with her kids and started packing her things. She told Neil she was taking the children to her sister's house and he shouldn't contact them until she decided what she wanted to do. Neil tried to stop her, claiming he loved his family and had never meant for any of this to happen. He said he was confused about his feelings and had made mistakes, but that didn't mean he wanted to lose his wife and children. Shirley told him he should have thought about that before sleeping with his brother's wife. The evening ended with June and Neil leaving together, Shirley taking her children to her sister's house, and my parents trying to process the destruction of both their sons' marriages in one night. I took Christian home around midnight and haven't spoken to anyone since. My phone has been ringing constantly, but I'm not ready to deal with the aftermath yet. I have messages from my mom, my dad, my sister Sky, who heard about everything from mom, and even some from June trying to explain herself. The only person I haven't heard from is Neil. I feel vindicated that everyone finally knows the truth, but watching my family explode was harder than I expected. My parents are devastated. Shirley's world has been destroyed, and her kids have no idea why Daddy isn't coming home. Part of me wonders if I should have handled this differently, but I'm tired of being the only one dealing with the consequences of June and Neil's choices. At least now, everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with. Christian is sleeping peacefully through all this drama. I'm determined to make sure this mess doesn't define his childhood, no matter how long it takes to sort out custody and rebuild family relationships. The legal proceedings start next week. My attorney says the recording and financial evidence make for a strong case, especially now that the affair is admitted. I never wanted it to come to this, but June and Neil forced this confrontation. They made their choices, and now everyone gets to live with the consequences. What happens next is up to them. Final update. You guys, it's been 3 months since everything exploded at family dinner, and I need to give you the final update on this nightmare. The legal proceedings are wrapped up, custody is settled, and the family dynamics have completely changed. Some of you have been following this saga from the beginning, so you deserve to know how it all ended. Quick recap. I caught my wife June and brother Neil planning to financially destroy me while I was holding our newborn son Christian. After months of building my legal case, everything came out during a devastating family confrontation where I played the recording of their plans. The immediate aftermath was brutal. Shirley filed for divorce from Neil within a week of family dinner. She took their kids to her sister's house and hasn't spoken to him since, except through lawyers. My parents were so devastated they couldn't even look at Neil for the first month. But the real drama happened when June and Neil tried to salvage their situation by doubling down on their story about being in love and unable to help their feelings. June started calling me constantly, alternating between trying to convince me that we could work things out for Christian's sake and demanding that I agree to shared custody immediately. She kept insisting that her affair didn't mean she was a bad mother, and that keeping Christian away from her was cruel and vindictive. The conversations were exhausting. She'd start by apologizing for hurting me and claiming she never meant for things to happen this way. Then she'd switch to justifying the affair by listing everything she saw as wrong with our marriage. According to her, I was emotionally unavailable, financially controlling, and had never really understood her needs. She said Neil listened to her in ways I never did. He made her feel appreciated and supported her ambitions while I just wanted to keep her in a traditional wife role. She claimed their relationship had started as emotional support during a difficult time in our marriage and had naturally evolved into something deeper. When I pointed out that none of that explained the financial deception or the plan to bleed me dry, she said she'd only been protecting herself. She claimed she was scared I would leave her with nothing if I found out about the affair, so she'd been setting aside money as a security measure. The $15,000 wasn't about greed or manipulation, it was about survival. She said she'd been planning to use that money to support Christian if I abandoned them both after discovering the truth. I asked her how planning to take the house and force me to pay child support while living with my brother fit into her survival narrative. She said she'd never actually intended to go through with those plans. She'd just been venting to Everly about worst-case scenarios. The recording contradicted everything she was claiming, but she kept insisting I was taking stressed conversations out of context. She said people say things when they're scared and angry that don't represent their real intentions. Neil tried the same approach when he finally contacted me. He apologized for betraying my trust, but claimed he and June had a genuine connection that went beyond physical attraction. He said they'd tried to resist their feelings for months, but ultimately couldn't deny what they had together. He said June had been unhappy in our marriage long before he got involved, and he'd only been trying to provide emotional support during a difficult time. He claimed I'd been neglecting her emotional needs, and that their relationship had developed naturally from his attempts to help her work through marital problems. According to Neil, he'd actually encouraged June to try marriage counseling and to communicate better with me. He said he'd never intended to interfere in our marriage, but June had been so miserable that he'd felt compelled to offer friendship and support. When I asked him about the plan to financially destroy me, he said those conversations had been taken out of context. He claimed June had been scared and upset, and they'd been discussing hypothetical scenarios rather than making actual plans. He said the timing around the medical bills was coincidental. June had been planning to ask for a separation anyway, and the financial discussions were about how to handle expenses during a potential divorce, not about manipulating me into paying bills before abandoning me. Both of them kept trying to frame their affair as an unfortunate situation that had gotten out of hand, rather than a deliberate betrayal with calculated financial planning. But the legal proceedings told a different story. My attorney subpoenaed phone records that showed hundreds of text messages between June and Neil, going back almost a year. The messages started innocent enough. Neil checking on June during my work trips, June complaining about feeling lonely, discussions about family events and holidays. But by February, the messages had become much more personal. June was sharing intimate details about our marriage, and Neil was positioned himself as her confidant and advisor. By March, around the time I found that hotel receipt, the messages had become explicitly romantic. What really destroyed their credibility was the timeline of financial activity compared to their messaging history. June had opened the private account in December, but the messages showed they weren't discussing separation or divorce until April. She'd been moving money for months before they'd supposedly decided their relationship was serious enough to consider leaving their marriages. The messages also contradicted their claims about trying to resist their feelings. By January, they were already planning overnight meetings and discussing how to spend time together without being caught. There was no evidence of them trying to maintain appropriate boundaries or encouraging each other to work on their marriages. Most damaging was a series of messages from August, right before Christian was born, where they discussed the timeline for June leaving me. Neil had specifically advised her to wait until after the baby arrived and the medical bills were paid, because divorce proceedings would be more favorable if I'd already committed to the financial obligations. June had responded by saying she could probably stretch it out until after Christmas if Neil thought that would be better strategically. She wanted to make sure she got her share of holiday bonuses and year-end financial benefits before filing. These weren't scared, emotional conversations between people who'd accidentally fallen in love. These were calculated discussions about timing and strategy for maximum financial benefit. The custody hearing was devastating for June's case. Her attorney tried to argue that the affair didn't make her an unfit mother, and that Christian needed time with both parents. He claimed I was being vindictive by limiting her access and that shared custody was in the child's best interests. But when my attorney played the recording of June calling Christian her insurance policy and discussing her plan to take him away from me, the judge's expression changed completely. June broke down crying in court, claiming she'd never actually meant those things and had just been venting during a stressful time. The judge asked her directly whether she'd moved money without my knowledge and opened accounts in her name only while planning to divorce me. Her attorney advised her not to answer, which was answer enough. The financial records showed a pattern of deception that went far beyond someone being scared about their future. June had been systematically preparing for divorce while pretending to work on our marriage and plan our family's future together. The judge awarded me primary custody with supervised visitation for June until she completed counseling and demonstrated stability. She also ordered June to return the money she'd moved to the private account and to pay her portion of Christian's medical expenses. Neil's divorce was equally brutal. Shirley's attorney had copies of all the same evidence, and Neil lost custody of his children except for every other weekend. Shirley got the house, primary custody, and significant spousal support. The ripple effects through our families have been permanent. My parents struggled for months with having both their sons' marriages destroyed simultaneously. My mom went through a period of blaming herself, wondering if she'd failed somehow as a parent. My dad was mostly angry at Neil for betraying family loyalty, at June for deceiving them, and at the whole situation for destroying what he'd thought was a close, stable family. Neil tried to maintain contact with my parents initially, but every conversation ended in arguments about his choices and their consequences. He kept trying to get them to understand his perspective and to acknowledge that people can't help who they fall in love with. My parents weren't buying it. They'd seen the evidence of calculated planning and financial manipulation. This wasn't a story about forbidden love. It was a story about betrayal and deception that had destroyed 2 marriages and affected 4 children. My sister Sky was the most angry of all of us. She'd been close to June and had considered her one of her best friends. Finding out that June had been lying to everyone while planning to destroy me was devastating to her. She felt personally betrayed and used. Sky also had to deal with her own guilt about not seeing the signs or somehow preventing the situation. She kept going over conversations she'd had with June, looking for clues she'd missed or opportunities she'd had to intervene. The extended family took sides quickly. Most of our cousins and aunts and uncles were appalled by Neil's behavior and supportive of me. A few family members tried to stay neutral, saying it was a private matter between the couples involved. But neutrality was impossible once everyone heard the recording and saw the financial evidence. This wasn't a case of 2 unhappy marriages ending badly. This was calculated betrayal with innocent victims. June's family initially supported her, claiming I was being vindictive and trying to destroy her reputation out of spite. But when the legal evidence came out during the custody proceedings, even her parents had to acknowledge the seriousness of what she'd done. Her mother called me to apologize and to ask if there was any way June could make things right for Christian's sake. She was horrified by the recording and couldn't believe her daughter had been capable of such calculated deception. I told her that June could make things right by being honest about what she'd done, getting the counseling she clearly needed, and focusing on being a better mother to Christian going forward. But there was no going back on the marriage or the trust that had been destroyed. Neil's children have been the most heartbreaking casualties in all of this. They're 7 and 5, old enough to understand that something terrible happened, but too young to process the details. They know their parents are divorced and that daddy did something wrong that hurt uncle and made everyone angry. Shirley has been incredible about trying to protect them from the adult drama, while still being honest about why their family situation changed. She's gotten them into counseling and has been working hard to maintain stability in their lives. The kids ask about me sometimes, wondering why they don't see Uncle anymore at family events. Shirley has told them that Uncle is taking care of baby Christian and that the grown-ups had some serious problems they're still working through. I miss those kids terribly. They were like my own nephews, and I'd been looking forward to them growing up with Christian as cousins. But there's no way to maintain that relationship while Neil is their father, and while the wounds from this betrayal are still so fresh. Maybe someday, when they're older and can understand the situation better, we'll be able to rebuild some kind of relationship. But for now, the family fracture is complete. June and Neil are still together, which has been another source of drama. They moved in together about a month after everything came out, claiming they might as well stop hiding their relationship since everyone already knew about it. But the reality of their situation has been much harder than they anticipated. Neil lost his job when the affair became widely known at his company. Apparently, sleeping with your brother's wife and destroying your family's reputation doesn't play well with management. He's been struggling to find comparable employment. June's job situation has been unstable too. The stress of the legal proceedings and the custody battle has affected her work performance, and she's missed significant time for court appearances and counseling appointments. Their financial situation is precarious. Neil is paying substantial child support and spousal support to Shirley, while June is paying her portion of Christian's medical expenses and her own legal fees. Neither of them anticipated the financial reality of supporting two households while dealing with divorce expenses. The romance that seemed so compelling when it was secret and forbidden has been tested by the practical realities of building a life together under these circumstances. June has complained to mutual friends that Neil isn't the same supportive, understanding person he was when he was helping her deal with marriage problems. Apparently, it's easier to be someone's emotional support when you're not actually responsible for sharing their daily stresses and financial obligations. They've had several breakups and reconciliations over the past 3 months, which has been emotionally confusing for everyone involved. June keeps reaching out to family members during their breakups, trying to get support for potentially working things out with me, then disappearing again when she and Neil get back together. I've made it clear that there's no possibility of reconciliation. The trust is gone forever, and I'm not interested in trying to rebuild a relationship with someone who is capable of the level of deception and manipulation that June demonstrated. Christian is thriving despite all the chaos around him. He's a happy, healthy baby who's completely unaware of the drama that surrounded his birth. I've been doing single parenthood with help from my parents and sister, and we've developed good routines and systems. June sees him twice a week for supervised visits, which have been going reasonably well. She's completed the required counseling and has been working to demonstrate stability and good judgment. Her love for Christian is genuine, even if her methods of trying to secure his future were completely wrong. I've been trying to separate my feelings about June as my ex-wife from my recognition that she's Christian's mother. He deserves to have a relationship with her if she can maintain appropriate boundaries and prioritize his well-being over her own drama. The supervised visits will continue for another 3 months, and then we'll reassess based on her progress and stability. I'm cautiously optimistic that she's learning to be a better mother, even if she failed completely as a wife. My own healing has been a gradual process. The anger and betrayal feelings are still there, but they've been tempered by relief at finally knowing the truth and having the legal protections in place to secure Christian's future. I've been focused on building a stable, happy life for my son, rather than dwelling on what June and Neil destroyed. Some days are harder than others, especially when I think about the future I'd imagine for our family. But overall, I'm grateful to be free from the deception and manipulation. The family relationships are slowly rebuilding around the new reality. My parents have been incredible sources of support, and my sister has stepped into an aunt role that's been wonderful for Christian. We're creating new traditions and dynamics that don't include the people who chose to destroy what we had before. Neil reaches out occasionally, trying to apologize and rebuild some kind of relationship, but I'm not interested. The betrayal was too calculated and the damage too extensive for there to be any path back to brotherhood. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive him for my own peace of mind, but that doesn't mean I have to have a relationship with him. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Looking back on everything, I'm grateful I trusted my instincts and started recording her behavior when things felt wrong. Without that evidence, this could have played out very differently, with June successfully executing her plan and me being the one left financially devastated and fighting for access to my son. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to. Truth and evidence mattered more than manipulation and victim playing. Christian is safe and secure, and I have the legal protections in place to ensure his stability regardless of what June and Neil do with their lives going forward. For anyone dealing with similar situations, document everything, trust your instincts, and don't let people convince you that you're paranoid when you're actually seeing real problems. Sometimes, the people closest to you are capable of betrayals you never thought possible. Thanks to everyone who followed this story and offered support along the way. Christian and I are doing great, and we're building a future that's based on honesty, stability, and genuine love rather than manipulation and deception. Justice was served, and we're both better off without people in our lives who were willing to destroy everything for their own selfish purposes.